One of the really common things that happens with these old BMWs is that the bulbs that illuminate the mileage or other parts of the cluster burn out over time. This is an E39 5 Series, and as you can see here, it's difficult to read the mileage to the left here. These other ones here you can still read, and they're illuminated because of the bulbs in the back that are working. But one of the bulbs here is not working. It's burnt out, and I'm going to take out the gauge cluster, show you guys how to replace one of those bulbs today. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is actually remove the trim. That's this piece right here that keeps the gauge cluster held in place. Now if you have an X5 or some other models, the X5 is actually really easy, the E53 model. There's just 2 screws up here and the entire cluster comes out. It's a little bit more involved, still pretty easy overall to do the same job on the E39 5 Series, and I'll show you guys how to get started. Alright, the first thing we want to do is move the steering wheel down and all the way out. Just give ourselves as much room as possible while we're working on the car. The next thing we want to do is open up this tray if it's not already open. That will give us some room here to pry off this trim piece and remove the screws behind it. We're also going to need to remove this trim piece and remove some screws behind that. Finally, we will remove this plastic trim piece that surrounds the cluster, then we can remove the cluster itself. Alright, so let's remove this trim piece here. We'll open up our CD tray, we'll pry a little bit from this side, release that pin, and then we'll pry from this side as well. So there's 2 plastic pieces here that hold these pins in, and this one can be a little tight or difficult. Just take your time with it so that you don't mess up your beautiful faux wood trim. Now that the trim piece is removed, it will reveal 2 Phillips head screws that we'll take out. Next, we'll remove 3 small torque screws, one on the left, one in the center, and one here on the right. To do that, I'm using a T10 torx bit, which I'll link in the description below. Now we should be good to remove this entire gauge cluster trim. And over on this side right here, we'll just disconnect the plug from behind the headlight switch. Now I'll just swing this around to the right and leave it just hanging here sort of out of the way. And finally, we have 2 more torque screws. They are T10 size as well, located one here and one here. Then we can pull the cluster out. Alright, let's pull the cluster out. There are some plugs on each side of the cluster. We'll just push down these tabs and then slide off the connector. There's one. There's 2. There's 3. And finally, you might have this plastic clip here that's pushed into the back. Basically, just squeeze that and pull it off so you can release the whole harness. And with everything disconnected, we'll just slide this whole thing out the side. Alright, so here are the tiny bulbs that you'll be needing, and as always I'll link those up in the description below. These are about $1 or $2 each for the Osram aftermarket, or you can get the factory ones, which are exactly the same, from BMW for like $5 each. Alright, so here's the back of the gauge cluster here. These are the bulbs that we will be replacing, and I guess you could replace all of them if you need to. I really only need to replace 1, but I ordered 3 bulbs for some reason, so I'm just going to replace the 3 bulbs at the left side of the cluster here. The right side as we're looking at it, but if you flip it around, it'll be the left side. So we'll just turn these counterclockwise one by one with our needle nose pliers and extract each one. Here's one of our new bulbs. We'll just line it up, turn clockwise, and we're good. Alright, that's all there is to it. Now we can put this back in there. Alright, so let's slide the gauge cluster back in. Move your steering wheel if you need to. Okay, so I'm going to lay this cluster flat, plug in the harnesses. There are 3 if you remember. The blue plug goes to the blue connector, white goes to the white, and then black goes to the black on the other side. We'll shimmy this back into place. And we'll reinstall the 2 torque screws that secure the cluster to the dashboard. And then we'll pivot our trim back around. We'll plug everything back in, whatever we disconnected, the fog lights if you did, the headlight switch and the dimmer over on the left hand side if that's what you disconnected. Now we can reinstall the 3 torque screws that hold the top of the trim to the dashboard. And finally, we'll reinstall the larger Phillips screws. There's 2 on this side and 2 on the left side. And finally, we'll put our wood trim back into place. Okay, here's the moment of truth. Let's see if our mileage is now properly illuminated. And it appears to be working. Perfect. Before, I'll just do a little cut right here back to what it did look like when that bulb was burnt out. And here's what it looks like with the new bulb that now illuminates the proper mileage. As always, if this video helped you out, please smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.